Fair and content disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by the host do not necessarily reflect that of the Psychological Association of the Philippines and its management. Furthermore, the views and opinions expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect that of the host, the show, and the organization. Fair use is the copyright regulation that allows the limited use of copyrighted materials without acquiring permission from the right holders for comment and educational purposes. Views, articles, and images on this episode may contain copyrighted material which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner.
This is being broadcasted to the Teaching Psychology Special Interest Group's social media platforms, when available. If you have any questions for our guests, simply comment on this video and we will try to accommodate all your inquiries. Note that after this broadcast, we may no longer be able to answer your questions. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Live from the Philippines, Dr. Ver Reyes and Professor Monique Muyargas, Chairperson and Co-Chairperson of the Teaching Psychology SIG.
Ano ba ako? Lagi yung nawawala.
Hello!
Hi, happy afternoon. Hi. Ay, wala pa rin ako. Okay, there you go.
Ayan. Hello, dear.
How are you?
How are you?
Ito, may mga fly away. Alam mo, dapat may may salamin dito sa harapan. Pero hindi ako fly away. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. A pleasant, is it a beautiful Friday? I mean,
it's a gloomy Friday.
Talaga gloomy dyan. Dito medyo maaraw naman.
Okay.
Here in live in Marikina.
It's gloomy in Iloilo City.
Yeah. So just in case everyone is wondering, again, we are live on our social media platforms on Facebook and also on YouTube. Uy, happy tayo ngayon for YouTube. Yes, oo. Meron tayong, ngayon 202 followers na siya.
202? Oh my gosh! Thank you so much!
Thank you. Maraming salamat. At dahil dyan, pwede na nating i-customize yung URL ng Facebook page natin.
Nice.
Ayun. So, bumabati sa atin ng magandang hapon si Romel Agbayani. Meron din tayo from Marilao, Bulacan. Ano natin from Bulacan lately,
Yeah.
Ayun, sabi niya, may nagre-request. Sabi niya, please record this webinar for sharing to those who cannot attend. Yes, we will be recording this. You can watch our delayed telecast. Our delayed telecast on our page, or you can also look at it on YouTube. Yes. Nasabi ko na ba to from Marilao, Bulacan? Nasabi ko na yan. Okay. Sige. So, again, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat for joining us this afternoon. We have a very special guests for this afternoon. Oo. Nakalagay naman na yata dun sa caption natin. Dito sa taas at sa description box below. But again, we would like to thank everyone for having us as part of your, I don't know, afternoon habit ba?
Afternoon habit.
Correct. So again, we just want to say also na may 20-second delay tayo from our streaming service to our social media platforms. Also, hindi po kami nagbibigay ng certificates. Oo, kasi pag nanonood naman po kayo ng probinsyano o kaya nanonood kayo, hindi naman po sila nagbibigay ng certificate pag nanood po kayo ng episode.
Saka hindi kailangan mag-register, di ba?
Oo.
Always tinatanong yan.
Yes, lagi tayong nakakatanggap niyan. Dapat nilalagay na lang din natin sa baba yun. No?
Yes.
Para But
kasi marami pa tayong seasons, di ba?
Hindi ko sure. Mamaya.
Tignan natin.
Oo, malalaman natin mamaya. Okay, sige. It's 2:20 in the afternoon. or to 2020 kasi nga delayed tayo. So without further ado, we would like to introduce one of our special friends here at the Psychological Association of the Philippines. Iba din to no, yung ating, iba din yung ganda nito, girl, kapag nakita.
True.
Oo, iba. Anyway, without further ado, we would like to introduce the chairperson of the Developmental Psychology Division, Joanne Trina Moreno-Javier.
Hello, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank
you for having me here.
How are
Hi.
you?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, gloomy Friday din dito.
Gloomy Friday. Where are you ba?
Pasig.
Magkalapit lang naman pala tayo.
Hindi umabot yung araw masyado.
Ay, nako. Okay. Alright. So, Joanne, maybe you can introduce your, ano ba tawag natin? Co-FASI, co-teacher, your friend also, who will be helping you for this afternoon's webisode.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ver and Monique. No? Yeah, today, of course, I'm very honored to be with my colleague. Yeah, I'd like to call her my colleague. She's also a fellow colleague who teaches developmental psychology, and she is now teaching in University of the Philippines. And she just finished. I hope you won't kill me, Dani. She just completed her PhD. So let's all congratulate her. She is none other than Miss Dani Ochoa. All right, can we welcome her also?
Hi. Thank you for that. Na-conscious ako bigla.
Na-conscious ka ba kasi yung mga pumapalakpak din?
May audience impact.
So, thank you, Dr. Dani Ochoa. Yes, Dr. Dani.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So, how was your experience, Joanne and Dani, during the quarantine period, during this second sem, I guess?
Yeah. Would you like to answer first, Dani?
Well, it was a huge challenge kasi ang tagal up in the air. What happens next? Do I continue teaching or parang pass everyone na lang? So there was a lot of decision making on that part. While I was also finishing my dissertation.
Dissertation. In the time of COVID. I love it.
True.
Right. Okay. So, Joanne, because this is your division, ano ba yung madalas na, perhaps you can also invite our viewers, how they would be able, if they're interested, what the Development Psychology Division is about?
Yeah. Well, basically, we are the division who really caters from womb to tomb, no? So we are looking at the different stages of life and in different aspects as well. So you will see us in school, in corporate setup, in the community, and basically everywhere you can see us. So it's a rather not so laging tinatanong, ano ba yung DevPsych? Ano ba yung, what do you do? What do you guys do? So we do a lot. We do a lot. And it's sometimes it's hard to explain that that's a DevPsych issue or that's a DevPsych concern. That's why you see us everywhere. And it's really good. Thank you for inviting us also. This is also our chance to plug the division as well and where we are at. So we've had a number of webinars. Everything is on webinar at this time. We've had parenting webinars. We also partnered with the LGBTQ division just recently, and then with this partnership also with the teaching division. So you see, it's really very diverse now. Our presence is also very diverse. So,
that's right. Okay, thank you, Joanne. I think important din yung developmental psych. I'm not sure if it's required. Is it required ba in the undergraduate curriculum. Yeah. In the
undergrad, yeah.
Oo. Simply because psychology talks about human beings, and there are different types, no? Nagka-cut siya across developmental stages. And it is very important for the students to understand what are the differences, what are the commonalities. No? Monique, you have other, before, while we're preparing their presentation, you have questions for Dani?
Yeah. I'm sure you have been asked a lot of questions about how this new normal is going to affect schools and parents and families, no? And not many people are aware or familiar na importante ang developmental psychology. So if there are tips probably that you can insert into your presentations, that would be great for parents and teachers also.
Sure.
Sige.
Sure. Yeah. We'll put that in. Consider that.
Sige. All right. Okay, so sige, we'll start na with your short daw short lang daw yung presentation.
Short lang.
Sige, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Good luck.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Hi everyone. So for today, we'll be talking about how to teach DevPsych online. Although our area and our focus is on developmental psychology, I will also say that this webinar will be a mix of both DevPsych specific and more general online teaching ideas, no? Because it's something that we really need at this time. Okay, so just to give an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we start with questions of thinking about your pedagogy. And then after that, we'll be discussing what are the particular opportunities and strategies for the particular context or the current teaching context, particularly with COVID-19 and distance learning. And then, given that context, we'll be going into distance learning considerations and we'll give an overview of a sample approach as well as specific activities for targeting the learning outcomes that you craft for your teaching. No? So, going to the first part, when we plan for teaching, we always think about, I hope we think about our pedagogy. And during this particular period, I think it's an excellent time to really think about that. So in this session, we'll be discussing what we can do to reevaluate your pedagogy, particularly coming up with realistic learning outcomes, thinking about what your negotiables and non-negotiables are, especially in particular to DevPsych. No? We'll also be thinking about some questions about what approach to take, life stage ba or domain approach. And then we ask ourselves as teachers, how do I add value to what my students can learn? Anong papel ko bilang teacher now that we are doing distance learning modes? Okay. So now, when we look at our teaching, I'm not sure if this is a common experience for many higher ed faculty, no? Parang in the past few years, meron ng obedizing your curriculum. So yung learning outcomes na, yung usapan. So in teaching, DevPsych or otherwise, it's important for us to be able to define what we think students should be able to do by the end of the semester with us. And A helpful way also to concretize these learning outcomes would be defining overarching questions that are aligned with these outcomes. So I'll be going into that in a little bit. And so when we have those learning outcomes and we have those overarching questions, it will be a little easier for us to focus our content and assessment on these outcomes and questions. So in a little bit, we'll give you some of these examples. So going to these outcomes and these questions, and you can think about these key questions as questions that the students can ask themselves. Para siyang guide to thinking. For every topic that we go through, what can students think about in relation to the material in order to meet the learning outcomes that we have? Okay, so what I have here in this slide would be my learning outcomes, well, actually our learning outcomes no, sa department, and some questions that I raise with my students when we talk about these learning outcomes. So this is just a sample. You don't have to follow this. But just to give you an idea of how you can think through this process. So one learning outcome pagdating sa DevPsych would be identifying the scope of lifespan development. So to be able to do so, it might be helpful for students to approach the material with the question, what is development like at each life stage? So ano ba yung nagagawa ng baby? Ano ang nagagawa dapat ng bata, etc. And another outcome would be to discuss the basic concepts, principles, theories, and processes in lifespan development. So what questions do we want students to be able to answer in order to meet that outcome? Maybe this could be asking themselves, what processes contribute to this development? And how do social cultural contexts contribute to development? So another outcome would be critiquing theories and research in the field of developmental psychology. So we might ask students then, what evidence is available to support these theories and principles, and what are the strengths and limitations of these theories and research? One last outcome is applying the theories and principles to understand and promote one's own and others' optimal development. So the question for them to ask themselves whenever they approach the material would be, how can we promote optimal human development based on these principles, theories, and empirical research? So this is one way by which we can plan out our learning. No? Now, whenever we come up with material, we ask ourselves, nasasagot ba yung mga tanong na to? And do these contribute to meeting these outcomes? It's especially helpful to really think this through in DevPsych kasi if you read through or browse through any DevPsych text, it's so dense. There's so much to go through and there are so many choices to make talaga. And so focusing your teaching on these outcomes and these questions, or not necessarily these ones, no, but the outcomes and questions you have in mind, can help manage the semester, especially ngayong online modes where it might be even more important to really sift through what we want students to know and to be able to do. So that also leads me to the next point of thinking through ano ba yung negotiables and non-negotiables. So here, again, this is just a sample and this is what we've thought about as potential negotiable and non-negotiable coverage in a class on developmental psychology. I forgot to mention nung simula that although I'm the one presenting this part, this is really a collaborative work also with my colleagues from the department, si Doctors Annalyn Kapulong, Summer Parcon, and Sam Mendez. So, hindi lang sa akin din nanggaling ito. No? Anyway, so when we think about DevPsych, ano yung negotiable at hindi negotiable na makover during the semester. So when we were talking about this, we we found na medyo may common patterns in what we teach. It seemed that for all of us, non-negotiable talaga to cover cognitive and social-emotional development in class. And it's non-negotiable for us partly because the discussion requires more nuancing, especially in terms of the social-cultural context. Kasi kung titignan natin, diba, sa DevPsych, sobrang importante ng social-cultural context. And the cognitive and the social-emotional would definitely vary. And the meanings we attach to cognitive and social-emotional development would also vary depending on the context. So with the choices that we have to make, syempre, meron ding nababawasan yung coverage. So nung pinag-uusapan namin, parang pwedeng negotiable yung physical development from early to late childhood. Not because it's unimportant, but if you look at the content, no, and the material on these topics, they're very straightforward. And students can easily read through the text and understand this on their own. So making those choices would also be necessary for us to be able to really cover what we think matters most. So related to that is a decision also on what approach will we use. Life stage ba or domain approach? And honestly, for me, when every semester when I prepare to teach developmental psychology, when I review my syllabus, there's always that sense of dissatisfaction na parang ang hirap i-balanse nung coverage. Again, because the material is so dense. So, ang tagal kong nagba-back and forth parate dito sa life stage ba or domain approach. And what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one? So when we look at the life stage approach, isang I think something glaring about this is that this is how textbooks are usually organized. So, of course, as teachers, it's tempting na, okay, ganun na nakaayos, so ganun ko siya ituturo. But more than that din naman, with that organization, students are better able to appreciate ano ba yung distinct features of each life stage. So they can more easily answer nga, what are babies like? What are preschoolers like? What are school-age children like? And so on. So parang buong picture yung makukuha natin. However, when we look at these texts also, certain subdomains tend to have uneven focus kapag life stage approach. So for example, yung particular interests ko of gender development and moral development, sa early childhood and sa middle to late childhood lang naman siya pinag-uusapan. Or yung attachment, parang nakafocus siya sa infancy and then maybe a little bit sa early adulthood. So, merong ganoong unevenness. So, related to that is the next point that sometimes the theories tend to be kind of awkwardly organized. So, mapapansin natin, for example, okay, si Piaget, lalabas siya sa bawat stage from infancy to adolescence. Tapos si Erikson, isisingit as one paragraph. So, merong ganoong weird organization kapag by life stage. Pero pag by domain approach naman, so when we, if we decide to teach using this approach, we see that there's greater coherence in terms of discussion of theories and subdomains. So for example, you can have a session just talking about Piaget, another session just talking about Erikson, merong moral development, merong gender development, etc. So dito rin, mas students would then get a better appreciation of the continuity of development. That, okay, so for this particular domain, for instance, for moral development, ganito pala yung itsura niya from childhood to adulthood, for example. So it's easier to see that flow of development with a domain approach. However, the trade-off naman is a more diluted understanding understanding of each life stage. So yung tanong nga na, what are babies like? What are young adults like? It's harder to visualize and to understand that with the domain approach. So that said, it's not necessarily an either or matter. You can combine and you can choose, for example, to do a little bit of both. So for instance, by focusing on ano ba yung matingkad na issue sa bawat life stage. So for instance, in infancy, well, physical and sensory motor development would be play center stage, for instance. Attachment would play center stage. So you can have a session on attachment. Whereas in adolescence, you can have a session on identity. So may domain perspective, pero lumilitaw pa rin ano yung importante for the life stage.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to follow the exact order in the text.
Yes.
It also a lot of it is making decisions about what is most important to tackle for each life stage. Because there's just really too much to
overwhelming. If you look at the Dev Psych book, masyadong overwhelming. Parang Psych 101 textbook.
Yeah,
Diba?
exactly.
You really have to, you're tempted to like cover everything because feeling mo short-change sila, no? But it's a good input po na that you get to highlight what's more important in a particular stage. For example, in late adult life, ano yung mas salient na issue dapat na itatakot. Yeah, that's good. That's a good insight.
And so that leads me to the next point then, na yun yung papel natin, no, adding value as a teacher. Oftentimes we think of ourselves, or we kind of go on default modes na as a teacher, I am the source of information and I lecture and all that. Pero meron din namang iba na, as a teacher, it's I'm guiding learning and it's up to the student to learn on their own. Constructive naman yan, ganyan. So as teachers, we're looking for that middle ground. And how do we get that middle ground? So one big part of it hinges on what I've been talking about in the previous slide. No? As teachers, we are structuring the learning. First, by defining the learning outcomes. Yeah. So when we know what outcomes we want, then we can choose what is it worth tackling. And so with the learning outcomes, we are able to select from very dense content ano yung mahalagang mapag-usapan. But also in DevPsych, I read a book some time ago about teaching developmental psychology. Something that stood out to me was also the idea of teaching to your strengths. So as teachers, we have our own background, for example, in terms of research and advocacy. So for me, I really dedicate a session on moral development and gender development kasi yun yung research interests ko and I have work on that. And I also discuss child discipline and corporal punishment heavily because may research and advocacy ako doon. So it's something that we bring in as well, and we don't have to be afraid of talking about it a little more. Kasi yun din naman yung mabibigay natin na wala doon sa text, no? And another would be, adding in your personal experiences and values. This doesn't mean oversharing. We've all had those teachers na puro kwento and TMI na we don't need to know that. But rather than yung personal experiences na TMI, it's really more of, as a developing person, you, as a teacher, would have already had certain developmental insights that the students do not yet have. Whether as an adult or even as a parent with a child, then there are things that you have personally observed that flesh out development beyond the text. And your values would also come into play in terms of how you frame the issues, the developmental issues that come up in the text, no? Because we do acknowledge that that this knowledge is not value free.
Yeah.
So we're also bringing in that interpretive lens
Mhm.
based on the values that we bring. With that, we are also scaffolding how students think about developmental issues. So we, as teachers, also guide their thinking so that they can better identify ano ba yung recurring developmental themes and principles. So, for example, being able to talk about the importance of stable and close relationships throughout the lifespan. So, pwede natin yung ma-flag, no, na infancy until death.
Yeah.
Importante yung relationships na yon. Um, and I think sa akin, one of the most crucial really is integrating the social-cultural context,
Yeah.
particularly the Filipino social-cultural context. I don't know if you've ever noticed sa mga textbook minsan, parang afterthought yung culture.
Yes,
Parang,
that's
by
very
the way,
true.
ganito sa ibang culture. So
Yes.
parang yung dating pa rin, okay, these are the concepts and the theories. And their assumption is, this is true. And then, oh, but in other cultures, it's like that.
Yes.
So as teachers, it's our role to weave culture in, not as an afterthought, but
Yeah.
as inextricably linked to development. Um, so one level that we can do this is by providing empirical work from Filipino researchers. So marami ng research out there. We can talk about that later on sa Q&A. For example, yung body of work nila Ma'am Lian, Dr. Lian Peña Alampay, Parenting Across Cultures. Ang dami nilang parenting research. So yun, mga mahalagang maipasok, no? But we also guide their thinking in terms of ano ba yung issues sa social-cultural context natin na mahalaga sa development. So with that, we are also better able to guide students' thinking about the implications and applications of these theories and research within our context, and these implications and applications both for individual behaviors but also institutional policies. Na ano bang papel ng developmental psychology in promoting development at the societal level and at the individual level. So as teachers, we have that leeway, and well, not just leeway really, but the responsibility
Yes.
to guide their thinking so that we add value to the textbook. Kasi ngayon naman, di ba, distance learning, pwedeng, oh, sige, basta basahin yung textbook, mag-quiz tayo. Diba? Pero ito, yung meron pa rin tayong bigay at dagdag sa kanila.
And it's nice to have this input because we sometimes forget that the Filipino identity is at the core of the developmental life process, no? Sometimes na-alienate natin yung sarili natin from what we are actually experiencing as human beings going through the developmental process, while putting on like a Western made principle or theory na hindi naman ma-apply fully, no? Or makakalate ang estudyante sa mga ganong, if you don't put it in context, and that's very important. And more often than not, most teachers commit that mortal sin of having Filipino psychology as an afterthought. And it's a very good reminder sa ating mga teachers na nanonood that this is a conscious and mindful effort for us to incorporate this very important element of the development as highly social-cultural.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, there's a Filipino context. It's very important to integrate. But also, right now, we have a very unique situation, no? In terms of the COVID-19 context and distance learning. And on the one hand, that brings so many challenges. But at the same time, in terms of teaching developmental psychology, it could also provide opportunities and offer particular strategies that we can use. So I'll be talking about that next, no? So ano ba yung opportunities na dala nito? Minsan, ang hirap isipin yung opportunities na parang, ang hirap eh. But, I'd like to think that we can at least gain something from this. And one is something that we're doing right now. No? If you're attending this webinar, you're already doing this. It's been a huge opportunity for us to reevaluate our teaching philosophy and pedagogy.
Yes.
So, given this situation, hindi pwedeng yung default modes natin. So, napipilitan talaga tayo mag-isip, mag-reevaluate. And at the same time, it's also an opportunity for us to work with our colleagues. So in our department, for example, we've been talking about coming up with modules among the teachers who are teaching the same class, so that we can work together to come up with materials. So yun din yung isang mahalaga, that we work with others, whether formally or informally, but we I think the sense of community is also, we are pushed to really strengthen our sense of community during this time. So we draw from each other as well. And for DevPsych, ang daming online materials and resources. Yung tignan nyo lang, ang daming cute baby videos, di ba? Sa YouTube. So, marami namang pwedeng paghugutan na resources. And for students, because they're stuck at home with their families, this also provides an opportunity for them to look more closely at the development of others who are not in their life stage. Of course, we have to get...
marami silang i-contribute niyan.
Kasi talagang whether yung whether they like it or not, kitang-kita nila. So yun. And they're also consuming more media right now. So we can also help shape that developmental lens in the media that they consume. So like ako, pag nanonood ako ng K-drama, parang, uy, eto yung DevPsych dyan. yung Reply 1988, it's like a whole semester of DevPsych.
Wow! Yan. Pinaplug na from Dani. Yan.
So kung gusto niyo ng teaching material, Reply 1988. So, helping sensitize them with one opportunity. So linked to that would be strategies that they can use, that you can use as teachers. And one really is focusing on the COVID situation. So by asking students, for example, how is this pandemic affecting development at each life stage? Kasi bawat stage talaga, merong epekto yung pandemic sa pamumuhay at sa development. We also ask how these issues can be addressed in a developmentally appropriate manner, and at different levels. We can also, as a strategy, ask students to monitor and respond to current events that affect development. So for example, ngayon, mainit na usapan yung anong mangyayari sa education, di ba? So we can use these as discussion points. And finally, we can also invite expert speakers. It's at least wala na tayong distance constraints, no? So pwedeng live or pre-recorded itong speakers, and they can talk about their research or their advocacy, their practice in developmental psychology. Okay. So now moving on to the more practical layer, what are our considerations when we talk about distance learning in general and developmental psychology in particular? So one is the student context, na ba yung pinanggagalingan nila. Another is how to structure learning and assessment. And then thinking about the challenges and potential solutions. Okay. So when we look at the student context, it's very important for us to know ano ba yung internet and tech capacities of the students. What are they able to do and what are they unable to do? Ano yung learning environment nila? Are they at home? Are they in a dorm? Etc. Who are they living with? Are there certain expectations of them to contribute to the household, etc.? Another, related dun sa sinabi ko kanina, sinong kasama nila sa bahay, so that you can also get an overview, okay, what developmental experiences might each student contribute, And importantly also, what are the potential barriers to learning? What might prevent them from, for example, if you have asynchronous sessions, what might prevent them from, asynchronous rather, what might prevent them from attending this? So these are important to establish. So based on this context, then we can plan out how do we deliver learning and how can we assess learning. So in terms of structuring and preparing for learning, it's very important to mix it up both with synchronous and asynchronous strategies. We can't expect that students will be able to attend all at the same time.
Yes.
Iba-iba yung mga sitwasyon nila. So we're gonna have to combine. We also mix up with a wide range of media, partly because magkakaiba yung internet bandwidth, for example, magkakaiba yung devices na gamit nila.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to accommodate those with the least, so that they are not disadvantaged by the situation. But at the same time, we try to maximize interaction opportunities. So later, Joanne will be talking about the specifics now of these. And in terms of assessment, something that I would like to emphasize is that now is not the time for high stakes exams. Ang hirap mag-expect that they will be able to sit through like 50 or more items in one go, for example. So we need to think about how we can assess. So it might be important to cut them down into smaller chunks with regular quizzes, for example, short but frequent reflections, and yung nabanggit kanina, a COVID-related final project maybe. A big part of assessment also is not so much about evaluating natuto ba sila o hindi, but also helping students pace their learning because there's such a high expectation of self-regulation. But and even if in psych we say na importante yung intrinsic motivation. Honestly, in this situation, we cannot count on intrinsic motivation alone. So by providing these opportunities to structure and pace the learning through assessment, students can also better regulate their learning. Given that, marami ring challenges na hinaharap talaga, no? So there are certain challenges, maybe at least some, I wouldn't call them entirely solutions, but maybe suggestions.
Yeah.
So one that I've mentioned is uneven access to technology. So one way by which we can address this is with that combination nga of synchronous, semi-synchronous and asynchronous. Siguro yung semi-synchronous, paliwanag ko ng konti. Ito yung ginagawa ngayon actually, nitong teaching SIG. So there's a live session right now, people can interact, that's a synchronous part, but it's also recorded so that people who were not able to attend can still catch up. So nobody misses out. Another challenge is sustaining attention. So kung pre-recorded videos to, the suggestion is to keep it short. At most 20 minutes. Kung kayang less, even better. So next, and related to that, is student engagement. So nabanggit ko nga kanina, no, intrinsic motivation alone will not cut it. Although we could increase intrinsic motivation by highlighting the relevance of material, and also by anchoring in the current situation and issues, we can also nudge them a bit through frequent but low stakes assessment, like the short reflections and quizzes nga. Another challenge is understanding instructions. Kasi kapag iboto mo sa kanila, sometimes they might be shy about asking questions or hindi instant yung opportunity for clarification. So it's important that from the beginning, we provide very clear instructions and even model expected responses para alam na, okay, ito yung inaasahan sa akin. Now, something particular to online learning, lalo na no, kung may mga discussion forums na gagamitin, would be privacy issues. So, in developmental psychology, some sharings will be very personal. And so easy to share something personal and then may magsa-screen cap. We don't want that to happen. So it's very important at beginning of a SEMP lang, we collaborate with students. Ano ba yung expectations? Ano yung guidelines? Both for disclosure and also for respecting other people's disclosures. I'm not going to go into detail, but I will plug last week's session with Bea Torre. Yung teaching LGBT psych, maganda yung pagdetalye niya on tackling privacy issues and also creating safe spaces. So you can check out that video. It's a little before the 1 hour point. So yeah, check nyo na lang. So isa pang challenge is establishing rapport. Di ba parang first day of class yun, dami introduction, getting to know you, you call students by name, biglang nawala yun sa online. So one way nga to establish rapport with students would be by finding out their context because it communicates, may pake ako sa'yo. I want to know where you're coming from, I care about you, and that's one way of establishing rapport. And establishing personal communication then with students. It can be at the group level, but also at the individual level. And related to that is the last point. Although we want to reach out to them and to communicate, we also need to better establish boundaries with an online teaching setup. Being online doesn't mean being available 24/7. So, kailangan din ng malinaw na communication plan. Ano lang yung platforms where you can reach me? Yung please, not Facebook Messenger. Anong oras at araw lang pwede tayo mag-usap? Because we want to respect each other's time. So, clearly establishing that is important also with distance learning. So, ayan, last na part ko. Just to give a very brief sample, na pag-usapan nga namin in the DevPsych or among the DevPsych teachers in UP, paano natin nahatiin yung SEM? And so we came up with a very rough calendar. So this is just an example. Again, hindi naman kailangan sundin. I also note that meeting is a very rough term here kasi it depends sa strategy. But the point of breaking it down in this way is also so that you can pace students' learning as well as your own output as teacher and your assessment. So if you notice dun sa bandang gitna, sa middle to late childhood, it says including gender and moral development. So ito na yung nabanggit ko kanina na mixing it up.
Yes.
Kasi if you look at the textbook, these two topics are covered in early childhood and middle to late childhood, but are covered more extensively sa middle to late childhood. So pwede rin naman to move things around a bit like that, no? And what we did also for our department, yung pinaghatian namin that each person will be into about 2 to 3 modules, 2 to 3 topics. And then each module will contain an outline of ano yung content. So what topics are you expected to cover? What materials will need to be used? And this might include, for example, yung mga video na nga, yung mga links, things like that. Activities, ano yung assessment then, and ano yung additional resources needed. So for us, for instance, we came up with a repository of local research that we can use to supplement our
So that's a very good suggestion. You create a repository within your school, or institution. So colleges or universities can actually create now even like a Google Drive or access para hindi na sila maghanap pa anywhere, no? Kasi most students or some teachers would not even have the resources, and as early as now they can actually get it.
Yeah. And going back to the point I made earlier, dahil itong ginagawa nating transitioning to online teaching, it helps to share resources talaga. Because it will be redundant din with effort. We're all sharing the same materials. So why not share? It's not to say that we will all teach in the same way, but at least we have those resources on hand so that we can teach in the way we want to. Okay. So, yeah. Now, Joanne will be talking about ano yung mas specific na activities to target learning outcomes. So, I will go
Yeah, we would
backstage.
like to remind our viewers, pag may questions kayo sa kinover ni Ma'am Dani, you can actually post it in the comment section or the comment field, and we can get back to that later when everything's finished, so we can post your questions to our facilitators. Thank you, Ma'am Dani.
Hi, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Clear,
All right. Yeah, thank you, Dani, for that transition. Also, I guess she has mentioned that what she discussed earlier was really the framework, no, that we ground on, based on the mode of instruction, which is really distance learning, and specifically on DevPsych course. So, my part would really be more on the specifics on what we can actually do to be able to deliver the course well and optimize the mode of instruction. So, yeah, well, the next slide will show you. It's actually a link. Okay? I would really like to acknowledge a colleague also of mine, Faith Moral. She came up with a video on how to record your lecture.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how you guys can
They can screenshot
that.
it, ma'am.
You can screenshot it.
Yeah,
Okay, so it would really be very helpful to have a guide because, well, this is something new. We have to admit that this is something new. Whoever thought that we would need to take a video of our lectures, no, but here we are. We have to adapt, and this is a guide that could help us in that endeavor. It will have a learning curve, definitely. So it would be best to start familiarizing ourselves with that. So I started with that because, as mentioned by Dani earlier, no, we have to recognize that there are the context of the students that we have are really varied. So we cannot just really strictly impose that we have to be synchronous or asynchronous all the time. We have to mix it up. So this is one way to do that, record our lectures. And then for those who could not make it during the time of the actual lecture, then they could access that, right? And the next slide would really be more on what you can do. So there is really a wide range of media that we can take advantage of or we can leverage on. So if your institution has an LMS, a learning management system, we would really have to familiarize ourselves with it, no? So what are its features? What activities can we insert? So most LMS, they have features on, for example, forum discussions. So you may want to use that platform instead of the social media, because this is something that could really, it could address the privacy issue, no? Because, well, they could still screenshot it, but as mentioned earlier by Dani, you will have to really set the ground rules at the onset. So, this is something that cannot be seen by everyone because it's through the LMS. So it's a feature that you can also time. Also a feature that you can arrange a schedule on. So that's just one of the features now of a typical LMS. So it's really important that we have to navigate and familiarize ourselves with it. So definitely we have to decide on a communication platform. Okay, so again, social media is fine. You can communicate at an individual level, as mentioned earlier, or at a group level. So you can also make use of this in terms of, for example, presenting a case and having discussions of a particular developmental task, of a particular developmental stage. So you can make use of this platform instead of you doing it during the lecture, because definitely it's more interactive, it's more engaging if we have it like that. So that's one. Okay, and aside from that, we can also maximize interaction opportunities. So how do we do that? So we make use of virtual engagement activities. So ano ba yung mga virtual engagement activities? So you can probably send first an activity that they can do. Again, no, I will always go back to the idea of we have to be creative in being able to engage them. I guess this that hindi lang hawak to ni DevPsych in being engaging. No, it cuts all across courses and I guess all across ages. Now we have to somehow have this thought that engaging them virtually is also our way of adding value to what we can give to them. Because otherwise, we can just simply send them links, resources, and then sabi nga ni Dani kanina, we can have a quiz based on those. And we don't want that, right? So ano pa na we are teaching the course, right? So we have to also navigate our ways in engaging them. So I thought of, well, I do this now, although it's not an educational setup, no, so it's in the corporate, but I thought of why not do it also in the educational setup. So I send an article, and then I send a puzzle that they can, solve based on the article. And then that's what we base on during the discussion. So it's not purely like, kasi ang dense nga, sabi nga kanina, di ba, ang dense ng so many information that you will have to absorb in a 20-minute lecture. That's quite long already. So introducing activities like these would really help also in helping them absorb it in a way na hindi din overloaded brains nila. One way also is assigning projects that allow them to explore on their own developmental trajectory. So I also do this during the face-to-face classes, but I saw that I did not see it yet, but I think this is still something that we can bring in, no, during the distance learning way. So when you can interview your caregivers, and then what they bring in during the discussions would be their experiences already. So they have the data based on their own development, and they can share it also with a group or with a class. So it does not mean that we are in distance learning. Everything else that we did before is no longer applicable, right? So we will have to really fresh out the things that we can ask them to do, and then check a balance, no? So we cannot really expect them to write a lengthy reflection paper of a whole movie, for example, right? So we might want to, and problema din natin yun, babasahin natin, di ba? So parang we have to strike a balance as well, no, on how to introduce these activities. So, and one more thing is maximizing learning resources. So, mentioned kanina, especially in this unique situation, no, we are practically most of the time at home, and we are with our families. We are with our families na definitely who are not of the same developmental stage as we are. So, inside pa lang in our households, or if not families, well, with people, definitely they have their own sets of developmental tasks that they are trying to achieve. So they are already a source of data. That's what I mean. Okay. So make use of your own environment as resource. Okay. So you may also record a video of someone from the household. Sorry. This is an example. I'm with my
perfect
son.
example po.
So, hindi ko lang siya malapag. So, siya ang example ko. You take a video of him. And then, it's really observation of an infant, something like that. Really, there is so much that we can do. And that's both an opportunity and a challenge, definitely.
It's time po to think outside the box, that we're using the traditional always yung framework natin. It's now is the time to be very creative. Challenging medyo siguro po, ma'am, sa mga boomers natin na teachers. Pero we need to catch up.
Yes. It's challenging, but it's not impossible. So it's also really the time to collaborate. So as what Dani has shown, you can really help each other out. I mean, distribute the tasks. Well, what they did is distribute the modules across every colleague teaching the same course, and you know, it's richer like that also.
Yes.
Recognizing also that we have expertise in particular patients, for example, at least in our field, no? So it really, parang mas na-excite actually ako because it's more of an opportunity. But also, of course, recognizing that it's challenging. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, of course, we also have to include assessment, no? So, I'd like to emphasize also what Dani had said earlier, no? Now is not the time to really aim for, you know, the best
Usual
the
na.
quizzes. Yeah.
Yung mga
Yeah, we
items at saka lahat
Yes.
objectives. Oo.
always also think about yourself, no? Your
Yeah,
self-care
sure,
also. So, I mean, you will have to also look at how to balance things. So, regular quizzes, short quizzes,
Short ones,
and
yes.
yeah, short ones. Every now and then, knowledge checks lang naman din yun eh. Knowledge checks to see if meron bang na retain, or especially the essential one. So how do we go about this? Again, typical LMS features have these in place, no? So pwede ka mag-create ng quiz, pwede multiple choice, pwede essay, all those things. So again, it would require you to get to know the LMS better. I'm always talking about LMS because when sa distance learning, usually kasi typically there is an LMS. But of course, if you don't have, it does not mean that you cannot teach LMS. So there are other opportunities also. So the Google Forms, it can be transformed as a quiz. So again, thinking out of the box is really required, even up to the assessment part, no? So hindi lang siya simple na gagawa ka ng quiz, gagawa ka ng questions for the items, the test items.
I think it also has to make parang i-bridge niya po yung naset niyo na learning outcomes. It has to
definitely
make sense. So it has to be cognizant
targeted.
na yung anong sinet mo na learning outcomes can be measured by this particular assessment.
That's right. Yeah. So you always go back to that. So yun yung parang Bible mo in a way to, you know, check
your
na
map.
Whatever you're doing is parang may sense din, not just for the sake of may pinapagawa ka. So, yun nga, sabi ko, be creative in coming up with items. So, hindi kailangan multiple choice or all those things. It can also include other forms and means of assessing them. I always go back to
kasi yun po yung worry always ng some teachers, they ask about paano yung cheating, yung probability of cheating, kasi it again goes back to your learning outcomes and how you're going to translate that into questions that are more outcome based, not necessarily objective na identification or whatever. It's more of like application ng mga principles and theories. So it's making sure that you're asking the right questions that would prevent them also not to cheat, no, or do those other stuff.
That's right. So parang yun yung kaya dapat alam talaga natin ano ba talaga yung learning outcomes na in-expect natin. Okay, so short but frequent reflection. Okay, so again, it does not have to be something that's written all the time or attached in the email all the time. Imagine, I mean, you have to open those attachments 30 times, for example. All right, so it can come in the form of discussions, no? So you will have that lens as a teacher also on looking at the quality of the responses, no? If it's on point, okay? If it's something that is really a quote unquote learning, no, from what has been discussed or read, okay? And discussions also, well, the invitation of guest speakers, sandali na ngayon, okay? Hindi mo na kailangan i-arrange yung transportation, okay? So, for me, it's something that that's more exciting, no? Kasi, the challenge is, of course, the time na lang of the expert, but then again, you can also record. So, you know, it's there's really so much that we can do. we will just somehow have to start from scratch for some of us, no? For most of us, I think. Okay, so let's look at it as an opportunity, as parang as an exciting part of teaching. Right?
Hindi
So,
sa threat. Kasi
yes,
most of the time, iniisip natin na threat siya, na, oh my God, what I'm gonna do? Ano to? Ano mangyayari? Parang na-overwhelm ka na sa information, and how to translate that information into learning for your students, nakaka-overwhelm nga naman talaga. Yeah. Pero we would like to assure our teachers na hindi kayo nag-iisa.
of course, yeah, we're all in this together. Okay. All right, kasi tama nga yung sabi mo, ma'am, no? Hindi siya threat, definitely. Because distance learning does not mean that may exchange na yung teacher sa technology.
Yeah.
Definitely not. We will just use technology as a tool. We still have to make sure that without the teacher, hindi pa rin ma-maximize or optimal yung learning. So that's why we have to make sure that there's value add as teachers. So I guess yun yung parang lagi nating we have to always think about. All right. So finally, no, something that's more appropriate during this time, no. So medyo nag-iba din talaga ang developmental trajectory at this time, no. We were born at a unique time. Okay, we were across developmental stages, iba-iba ang challenges. Like for example, personally, no, nag-start yung quarantine, my baby was just a 3-month-old baby. Ngayon, 7 months na. Lahat ng milestones niya across those 4 months. Ang bilis kasi first year eh. Nakita ko. So, napaka-rich ng data. At least with my personal experience, sabi ko, ma-video din ako. So, at least, may mapapakita ako and nagpaalam ko na lang sa kanya paglaki niya. So, you know, it's an opportunity especially for them. And we also look at this stage. When I teach kasi face-to-face website, I always give more time, for example, on adolescents and early adulthood kasi yun yung profile ng students.
Yes.
That I handle. So, mas personal ang attack because it's their own developmental stage at this time. So, I can still focus on that for this particular distance learning because, well, they are definitely still at that stage. Hindi naman naiba yung stage. Ang naiba lang is the environment that they are in. And it's really something very different from those whom I taught before. So, there is definitely going to be a comparison. And the uniqueness of the data also that they are going to present and the experience that they bring in is something that is a contribution also to the field as well. So yun yung parang excitement, at least on my end, when I teach that side. And for now, I guess that's what I can bring in. I guess we are ready. Dani and I are ready if there are
and we would like
violent reaction.
Acknowledge yung mga kasamahan natin sa Dev Psych na tumulong sa atin. Yes po, ma'am. Sino po sila? Ayan.
I think I'd ask Dani to acknowledge them again.
Okay. Yan, yung mga kasama namin, Drs. Annalyn Capulong, Sam Mendez, Summer Parcon, and si Faith Moral. With her lovely video.
Thank you, everyone, for putting it together also.
Yay! Wala tayong palakpak. Maglalagay na ako ng palakpak.
Lagay na
sige. Ako dyan sa impact.
Ay, naputol yung palakpak. Okay. Okay, yan. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, Joanne, for
Thank you also for having us.
For a very comprehensive and ako kasi
insightful.
Ako kasi I would usually think na pag dev site dapat nanay yung nagtuturo. So, maraming hugot kasi. Parang yung sasabi ko sa mga baby.
Naguhugutan ko naman yung pagiging tita ko. So, okay lang yun.
I think magandang ano yon, no, point now. There is a particular advocacy that we can always add whenever we're teaching, let's say particularly in DevPsych, no, like Dani was saying, yung mga advocacies on juveniles, ganyan. So kung yun yung at I think yun din yung what resonates with from our previous guests, no, na hindi mo mahihiwala yung psychology in a way in terms of the geopolitics, societal issues. Kasi part yun nung kung sino tayo para mas makilala natin yung sarili natin. At very interesting si DevPsych kasi integrated, no, nag-intersect yung maraming mga
Actually,
you cannot help but tackle other issues as well, diba?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Something I actually do at the start of the SEM is have students brainstorm ano ba yung mga laws and policies in the Philippines that could be informed by developmental psychology. At ang dami. Kasi
health, you have social issues and so on. Dami.
Yeah.
Oo. Okay, sige. May mga questions. May questions ba tayo? Asa ba yung mga
wala pong certificate.
Yun talaga yung concern. It's for your development. Your personal.
Correct. So sige, meron tayong mga, how to register to the webinar. May nagtanong. Wala po. Hindi na po tayo nag-register. Sige. We have from, Alin. Okay. Sabi niya, I do this with my DevPsych classes. I ask my students to don't look far, a simple look into their own lives. Ay, nag-iba tayo. Okay. Lalong lumiit. So, lalong hindi ko siya nabasa.
Their own lives, homes will help them reflect on developmental issues or concepts will be helpful. Yeah, true.
Hindi na kailangan lumayo.
Diba, pag if you live in kasi you're learning from the house, ang daming age groups. Merong titas, merong grandparents, merong younger siblings. So, lahat ng information nandyan. Yeah.
Sinasabi ko lang sa kanila, don't name names na ha. Para ma-protect naman yung anonymity of their children.
Yeah.
Okay. Medyo mahaba na patungan yung mga mukha namin. Okay. Sige, Monique.
Okay. From Reginald, if we cannot depend solely in our students' intrinsic motivation, can flow help eventually? How about developing grit? I know it is really hard to engage students, pero saan ba kukuhanin ng mga guro kundi sa motivation alone ng mga bata? Should we talk about cognition or cognitive development instead? Would giving them low-stake assessment change the situation, lalo na po ang mga walang motivasyon na bata? Ang dami. Loaded question.
Alin dyan ulit?
Kayo pa. Go ahead.
Sige. Well, another class I teach actually is Principles of Learning. So, kaya ko rin sinabi na hindi necessarily purely intrinsic motivation. Kasi, di ba, when we talk about intrinsic motivation, you're doing something for its own sake because you enjoy it, you find it meaningful. And actually, flow is one form of intrinsic motivation. So, kaya ko nabanggit yung low stakes assessment because it's a form of extrinsic motivation. And I know that extrinsic motivation isn't very popular. Kasi nga, parang sinasabi natin na, it's best if it comes from within. But honestly, during this time, a nudge would also be helpful. And yung low stakes, kaya ina-emphasize ko rin yung low stakes because it's extrinsic, but it's not too anxiety-inducing na parang so much depends on it. At doon nga rin naman sa research on motivation, for example, sa self-determination theory, they talk about internalized motivation, where it's not purely intrinsic and based on your positive feelings about the task, but your eventual understanding of the value of the task and its importance in terms of your identity and your goals. So by setting up those small extrinsic factors like low stakes assessment, you can push the students a little bit to do the work. But as they do it more and come to realize what they can learn about the topic, for example, when they realize the value of it, then hopefully gagawin pa rin nila even if it's not enjoyable all the time, but because they realize it's important. So that's what we're hoping for. But yun nga, mas challenge talaga siya sa panahon ngayon. At siguro yun nabanggit yung grit. I suppose having that conversation with students also that we're not expecting 100% productivity from them, but instead, we're expecting them to do what they can, and this is what we're doing to guide you and to help you along. Para wala rin ng feeling na parang, basta, tuloy pa rin tayo kahit ano mangyari. Kasi nakakawalang gana rin yun for students. Yung kapag alam nilang andun ka para alalayan sila, that is also very helpful to keep the motivation going because social motivation din yun if the teacher is there for the student.
Oo.
Kasi di ba, yung mga dev psych people, masyadong comforting, masyadong nurturing, ganon. And it's good that we get to be reminded of that. But at the same time, our students also need to be reminded that we have to have standards that are set. Kahit, di ba, our school, our institutions have certain standards, our courses have certain standards. Sometimes that they need to be reminded of that as well. Kahit hindi 100% mabibigyan ng enough attention or productivity, pero at the back of their mind, this is a salient issue for them to be reminded na meron tayong standards na kailangan i-adhere to.
Siguro, I guess just an important reminder for them is parang do your best, whatever your best is at this moment. Hindi siya absolute best.
And you're not
we also have to be reminded. Isa pa lang. We have to be reminded also, that they are coming from from different contexts. Okay, and striking the balance is very, very challenging at this time because we don't know how balance is balance. So, sabi nga, if we give them a little nudge, baka sa iba, sobrang push na yon. Okay?
Yes.
Again, we don't want to baby them. We don't want to baby them. But, again, we always go back to, ano gagawin natin, di ba? So, we have to, in our own assessment na lang din, yun nga, our teacher's eye and instinct probably, we will have to bank on that because this is something that's very unique and different at this time. And wala siyang playbook that we can follow, na wala siyang manual na dapat ito yung gagawin natin. No, even these things that we are saying now, they are still on experimental level. No? So we can only try, right? So we have to remember that there has to be some flexibility as well.
Yun. Oo. So, maraming nagpapa-thank you kasi marami daw silang mga natutunan for today. It's also important. Yeah, I think it's also important not to be too hard on ourselves. I think as teachers also, tayo din naman nangangapa how much more than our students. No? Na are unable. Iba-iba din yung konteksto ng pinanggagalingan natin.
Yes, definitely.
Oo. Yehey! Thank you so much. Wala na tayong questions.
May questions pa ba?
Meron pa ba? Wala na yata.
Bakit daw, I said kanina earlier about
meron pa
ano
isa.
ba yung, bakit daw, why infancy and adolescent years respectively need longer time for discussion? Ayan.
Okay.
Kasi maraming ganap. Okay. Yeah. Actually, pinakamabilis kasi talaga yung development. I mean, a 1-month-old is very different from a 2-month-old. So imagine mo, i-stretch mo yan hanggang 2 years old. So mahaba talaga siya. Adolescents also, well, I guess dumaan na tayo lahat sa adolescents, no? Medyo mahaba-habang, maraming developmental
Hindi pa.
siguro iba na stuck, no? Kahit na mental age, nag-advance na. Kahit na chronological age, nag-advance na. Yung iba na stuck pa rin sa chronological, sa mental age of adolescents. And there are a number of issues that we will really have to tackle with adolescents, and basically looking at history, no? Hindi naman talaga siya, we didn't really include adolescents in the developmental stage. Far history of them, like include lang siya because of some events as well, industrial. So yeah.
Siguro in relation then to that, that could also be a good talking point, no? At the end of the semester, bakit nga ba laging ito yung pinag-uusapan? Perhaps because there is a lack of research also. I think we were talking about this last time, Monique, no? Na parang very few, hindi naman very few lang. Yung mga very interested, pero gaining traction when it comes to the older, ano man tawag doon, developmental stages or a latter developmental stages.
Yes.
And I think important yan, especially now, na very COVID-related din siya because there are, yung mga senior citizens are in a way marginalized, no? Yung
and even on gender disparities, you can tackle.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ano yung impact nito na, di ba, you would hear mga comments na dati pasaway tayong mga bata, pero ngayon yung mga
bata.
Actually, lumabas kasi bibili ng mantika or something.
Yung isang interesting sa COVID ngayon is midlife, yung pagiging sandwich generation na inaalaga ang bata at inaalaga ang ding magulang. And dealing with work all at the same time. So I think that's an important developmental issue to discuss din talaga sa panahon ngayon.
Yeah.
And siguro to help, I think you mentioned, Dani and Joanne, yung team teaching. And this could be a one way kung may kasabay si developmental psych na subject, let's say with social psych or whatever. And then perhaps a particular COVID-related project, pwedeng isa na lang din yung output for that, no? Na parang hindi hirap si bata or si bagets na
si teacher.
Kasi almost the same, no? You look at the content developmentally and then you look at how what are the social actions that could
So
develop.
now is really the time to sit down with your colleagues, no, your co-teachers in the psych department, and discuss and thresh this out because it can help all of you. I mean, like, hindi ka nag-iisa. Sometimes kasi we're tempted, ikaw na magturo kasi ikaw yung nanay sa akin. Ikaw yung tatay, ikaw yung may mga anak. But there are other colleagues who might be interested as well to have their inputs in terms of the sociocultural context and the intersectionality with the developmental stages, diba? So, yan. It's very important to start early now with your colleagues.
Yun yung point. Mag-prepare na for next time.
Kailangan na.
Yeah. Tama. Okay, thank you, Dani. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Developmental.
Thank you. Masyadong nurturing.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Kakaiba ang feeling.
Correct. Would there be other, baka gusto niyo mag-plug ng mga activities ng division, Dani, in UP? Again, congratulations in your successful dissertation. Thank you. Sabi daw ni Abigail, I am hoping that, sige, flash na lang natin. Isa sa, ako lang yung nagbabasa. Kasi sabihin nila, nag-i-invent.
Semesters.
Mahirap daw. Tignan po natin. Ang maganda po,
subject.
Kasi in UP Visayas, we have an elective na child psych. So yun lang talaga yung, they can do that, no? But also we have developmental psych. But you can, if you're revising your curriculum now, you can actually have new courses as electives that can supplement or that can scaffold yung core na DevPsych na course. Kasi may heavy naman talaga siya. Heavy.
Yeah.
Or encourage
It's
your
not at the graduate level.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
lahat ng stages yun. So,
Yeah.
I was going to
adolescent
say, encourage na lang na mag-graduate level work in DevPsych.
Para mas may
Interesado talaga kayo sa buong lifespan. Mag-graduate.
buong lifespan. Na-memorize nila lahat yan. So, hirap sa okay.
Yay! Maraming salamat. Joanne, you have new lined up activities ba for the next coming? Baka you'd like to
we are going to organize, although it was originally planned for this June, but unfortunately hindi siya natuloy. But we're looking at probably late July. We're looking at inviting an expert on senior citizens naman. So they're really very impacted at this time kasi, so we would like to have that webinar also on that side. But stay tuned, we are going to plug that definitely.
Yeah.
So you have a Facebook page din po, right?
Yes, we have a Facebook page, Developmental Psychology Facebook page. So you may check out for announcements.
Yes. Dani, Dr. Dani Ochoa, you have any?
Wala naman.
Gusto niya magpahinga.
True.
Baka may mga
Tinapay mo pa nga naman yung COVID saka yung dissertation, di ba?
Kailangan. Iba din yun. Ibang feat din yun.
Yeah.
Correct. And speaking of plugging, I think may mga kasabay din tayong webinars ngayon. With the Calabarzon in Maropa. So I hope that they also have replays on that. This is going to be replayed again, this episode. You can also watch it on YouTube. This is unfortunately, we have to end the season. We have 8 episodes, imagine.
Wow.
For this month, for season 1. And so people are asking daw if there is season 2. So papakita natin ngayon kung ano nga ba yung in-store natin for the next month ba? Tama ba, Monique?
Yes, next season. Yeah.
Okay. And I hope you guys would be able to watch this. Okay. Yay! So may season,
Ang daming ganap.
may season 2 tayo.
May season 2 kami!
Yay!
Amazing.
Yeah. Dahil hinihiling nila na magkaroon din daw with the other board exam subjects and the other subjects that we were not able to cover for this season. We'll bring them to you live, new webisodes this July. Hopefully may time pa rin naman to prepare for the first semester na magaganap. So sana supportahan niyo pa rin kami. Increase natin yung subscribers.
At saka yung visibility ng mga divisions. That's important.
Yes, definitely.
You know, we couldn't have done this without collaborating with the different divisions, with the different SIG. So maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward and we thank of course, the mothership, the Psychological Association of the Philippines. Sana ay mag-member din kayo. Hindi ko lang alam paano yung membership nila. But
You can visit their website. Yeah.
Our website.
They can go to the website at pap.ph. No, yun yung bago nilang website. With that, thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, Dani. Thank you, Joanne, for closing our
Thank you also.
Season ender ang DevSci.
Yes,
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
Dani.
Thank you.
Happy weekend.
Bye.
Bye.